987. Great. Yeah, so we are live.
Awesome.
Great. Awesome. So, welcome to the first edition of TestMu. We are honored to host everyone here today. I'm Sumesh. I'll be your host for this session. But before we start the session, we'd like to thank all our partners for supporting us and being a part of this event. We encourage you all to go and check out their booths from reception if you wish to connect with them later. Now, let me introduce you to the speaker of this session, Sam Connelly. Sam is an engineer in test on a fintech term in Sydney. They enjoy speaking at tech conferences, playing board games, and live testing on YouTube. Sam is also active in the tech community and has worked for a variety of companies over a 10-year period with a focus on mobile app development and finance industry. So join Sam as they share their stories on how they've improved engineering engagement around builds and how they decided on orchestrated different builds at right stage of development. So I hand over this call to you, Sam. Please take it ahead.
Thank you for the warm welcome, Samesh. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm presenting from the land down under in Australia, so I'm hoping there's no lag. Sometimes the internet here can be terrible, but it seems like we're okay today.
Yep.
But I can get into a whole spiel about how bad the internet is down here. It's pretty awful sometimes. But that's
We
not
can hear
what
you loud and clear.
it is not what we're here to talk about or complain about today. I'm sure everyone's got some horror stories that they could share about how bad the internet has been in some of their areas before.
Right.
So to kick things off, if I've got my slides up on my blog as well, so you can access them under this link, but I'll also reshare this link towards the end of the presentation as well. So this QR code should also take you to a blog post, which also goes through, has a link to the slides and some of the content presented in this one. I don't have the blog post completely live just yet, still a work in progress, but at least the link's up. So, setting the scene. I started this new role 3 months ago. It's with an insurance company, Encia. It's a tiny company. It's a small team of about 50 employees, about 14 software engineers, and I'm the first test engineer hire. So they were going along pretty well. They've been growing pretty progressively over the 12 years that they've existed, and they build out an insurance backend for other companies to manage things like policies and claims. And so it's a back office application for insurance. So we're not exactly high tech or the most sexiest technology out there. But they're just starting to get to a couple of problems in the quality process that they needed someone more dedicated towards testing and quality. So when starting a new role, it's useful to ask like the context of why this role exists, or to survey the engineers in your team. Ask them like, what are your biggest pain points around testing and quality? I've done this in nearly every role that I've started. It helps start the conversation about what other people expect from this type of role, but also what pain points people might want you to help out with. Some common answers that tend to come up as part of this process, bugs in production is a common one people like to complain about, inadequate test data, builds and test coverage. So builds taking too long, not having enough tests. One of the issues I observed when I first started was we'd have builds built in Jenkins and they would publish to teams all the time, but no one was paying attention to failing tests. So one of the problems with our integration tests is the engineers had built a integration test framework, and it's pretty awesome what they've built already. But no one was paying attention to the builds failing, and so it's a little bit of an issue when you put in all this effort to build all these tests. But if no one's paying attention to the feedback of those test results, then it can be a little bit challenging.
Right.
And that's come up a couple of times in teams. It's where people have built out all of these pipelines and all of this testing, and then they never pay attention to the feedback. And it's like, well, why did we engineer all of that testing to begin with? So the tech that they use in the back end, it is a Java shop. Nothing wrong with Java, just not a sexy new technology, and that's totally fine. We're using Gradle and Maven to help build out our back end. We're not using Git, and this introduces its own challenges. We're using a code repository called Mercurial, and I will go and explain that in a little bit more a bit further down. But it one of the challenges from using that means we can't just trigger builds based off a single commit, and we can't easily trace back failing builds to a single Jira or issue. We're using Jenkins to help manage our builds. We actually have a dedicated server in the office for some of our old school Jenkins. We are trying to migrate to having a Jenkins instance in AWS, but that's still a work in progress. We use Google Web Toolkit to build our web front end. And this is one of those technologies that has been around for a little while. Been around before UI automation was really popular. So there are some challenges using GWT as a front-end development tool. For example, GWT will change the IDs of the elements most times you re-render a page. So if you're using record and playback tools like Selenium or LambdaTest, the ID elements changing is a bit of a problem. It makes it a little bit harder to implement tools around UI automation. Over the last 4 months, we've been using a monthly release cadence to AWS instances. We can do ad hoc releases. We can also do continuous delivery if we choose to, but we have found like this is better for our customers. It helps give them a expectation of when they can have new features. And also we're dealing with insurance tech companies that don't necessarily have all of the technology either. Releasing too frequently is being quite frustrating for the customers we're engaging. So some people might say moving away from regular releases back to monthly releases might be a little bit of an anti-pattern, but it seems to be working pretty well for us as well. Just an example of how well the dev process it has worked for this team. In my first week, I was able to have a local dev environment set up in my first couple of days. And in terms of engineering onboarding, that is an awesome experience. So they've been able to streamline the dev laptops, get all of the tools pre-installed using images, so I didn't have to spend 3 or 4 days trying to get Java to work with Maven, with Ant, and Git or Mercurial, and so I didn't have to install all of the dev tools needed to get up and running. So it was just pretty awesome to have working code set up in my first week. Contracting for lots of other companies, sometimes it can take a month or two just to get a local dev environment working, and it is really frustrating. So it's just a breath of fresh air to join a fresh team and be up and running pretty quickly. So to go through how the patch system works in Mercurial. So with the patch, you have your patches applied in a queue, and generally, instead of working on a branch, you create a patch and then you make your changes in that patch. It does mean if you're at a certain spot in the queue, everyone else's patches above you are also in your working local repository. So this is great for encouraging regular small commits. And if you've got like a refactor piece higher up in the queue, it's a great way to get incidental testing because anyone who's further down the queue than you are is actually already incorporating your changes and is doing incidental testing with your changes in place. And so conflicts are managed a little differently using this patch system. You can't check out your patch if you're working on a file that conflicts with a patch further up. So you do tend to get fast feedback if someone's working on the same code as you are. That doesn't tend to happen too much. And I enjoy working on a patch system for that, encouraging small regular commits rather than having long-lived feature branches, which can also introduce its own challenges from a testing point of view. It just makes it hard to trace back specific changes to broken tests. But I'm sure that that's also a challenge using Git repositories, being able to trace broken changes further down the pipeline back to a single code change. One of the first things I did when I joined was create a little bash script that would change the IP address for that internal server that we have to manage our Jenkins build. Has when you're in the office, it has a different IP address compared to when you're working from home. So if you're constantly switching, and I like to go in the office 1 or 2 days per week, and it's a really flexible environment, people can come in how often they want, or they can be completely remote. The only condition we have is that we come in once every 3 months for a company day. But it means if I'm constantly changing between office and work from home, I have to go into my host file and update the IP address so I can access Jenkins. So a quick win here was creating a bash script that I can run from the command line that would just change the IP address based off what the Wi-Fi address was. If it was the office Wi-Fi, change it to the office IP address. And this is a great way to get a little bit of a quick win. I'm not all that familiar with bash scripting. I would not consider myself an expert at all. I had never used the sed command to append a file, but practicing a bit of bash scripting skills is just a great way to automate some of the regular tasks that we tend to do on a day-to-day basis. And doing anything from the command line will make you look like a super hacker anyway. So everyone will be impressed with your dev skills if you're doing everything from the command line, even if you're just checking your emails. Another script that I worked on was to go through every single patch in the queue between the release and the snapshot and run the unit test against those patches. I have some issues with this script at the moment. It doesn't always work all the time, so I've got lots of ideas for enhancements, but ultimately it'd be nice that if this fails at a particular patch, we can just then automatically post to the Jira, because the patch number is the same as the Jira number, and we can post to Jira with a comment, something along those lines, that, hey, it looks like this patch has broken some unit tests. We can't really do this for integration tests because they take too long to run. They take 55 minutes to run on average on Jenkins at the moment. And when your builds take that long to run, no one wants to run them locally. Also, there's more challenges with trying to run them locally too. But I digress. It's a future pain point to try and address at some point. We're able to run unit tests on every single patch because on average, these unit tests take a few minutes to run. And if there's 10 patches in the queue to run this against, this is a 30-minute job on Jenkins that I trigger on a semi-regular basis. One of the issues I've faced with Jenkins is being able to trigger builds off code changes because we're using Mercurial and not Git. And that is also quite challenging. So at the moment, I've had to just schedule builds at regular cadences to trigger these. I would ideally like to have them triggered off some other event, but it's we haven't investigated the engineering effort into what those triggers would be. So plenty of work. This was really just a starting point to try and get unit tests run against each patch so that we've got easier information available on what patch broke what tests. And this can be run locally as well if someone's curious. It just takes a little bit, and you don't really want to be sitting there for 25 minutes watching all of these tests run. So when I started, we had lots of issues with Jenkins, and builds just failing. We've made some progress. We've made some of the builds cleaner and pass more consistently, but there's still lots of issues. We've introduced some custom builds as well. This is what the old school Jenkins UI looks like. If you've never used Jenkins, it can be a little confusing, and there are better build tools out there, or build tools that have better UIs, are a bit more intuitive. But I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter what tool you're using, as long as it's the tool your developers are using. I've used TeamCity on occasion, and I've got some war stories to tell about how bad the UI is for TeamCity, and it's quite hard to build pipelines as code using that platform. Not that I want to diss on any of these platforms out there. They all provide useful tools and services. It's just I can still express how some of these are quite frustrating to work with. We also post our tests out to Teams automatically. We have a Teams channel where they will post to. I do find the linking when a build starts to fail quite useful, because you can navigate to the failing test reports if you've got the test reports set up in the build scripts. But because this is a channel that out of a gazillion other Teams channels, not everyone's paying attention to this channel all the time. So as a way to get familiar with what tests were failing, I would investigate if there were specific tests that were consistently failing, maybe popping a comment on some of these going, hey, it looks like this one's failing because we've changed some of the configuration data underneath, which might be related to this patch or JIRA number, or tagging the developer that I think might be interested in some of these failing tests as well, or just trying to drive more conversation around why our tests are breaking. We do have some flaky tests in our current system. That's the thing with inheriting a bunch of legacy code. When you're starting a new team, no one is giving you a real fresh slate to start completely from scratch from. So you're always going to have these elements of legacy code to work with, trying to understand projects that have existed for 5, 10, maybe 20 years as well. So trying to get up to speed with some of that can be quite challenging. But trying to encourage this quality is a team responsibility by getting the developers a bit more involved with their broken builds if it seems like it's related to some of the work that they're doing at the moment. So another Jenkins build that has been really useful these last couple of releases is actually just going through and doing a DB rebuild on all of our backends. Our platform is really flexible. It can work on any database structure that you want to work with. There's 4 different database versions that we support. The problem is that Booleans are a little bit different between, SQL Server and Postgres. And we're using Liquidbase to do all of our database migrations. So if you're using a data format that doesn't necessarily play nice with Oracle or SQL Server, those migration scripts can fail. So I was running this most nights, and we were getting some really useful feedback. The last release, we actually had 4 database migration issues that we were able to fix before we did our regular release. And so just going through this process, sure, I could do this locally, but running these DB rebuild scripts, trying to set up the SQL Server, because we're working on Macs. Oracle and SQL Server don't work with M1 architecture. It's a real pain in the ass. And Oracle and SQL Server aren't going to release packages to work on a Mac M1 chip for whatever reason. So we, on our dedicated server in the office, we've got an instance of SQL Server that you can set up and run DB rebuild. But it takes a long time. Just doing the Postgres DB rebuild, that's pretty quick. That can take 25, 30 minutes, whereas the SQL Server one, that can take 50, 55 minutes. So sitting there for 50, 55 minutes, just waiting for a DB rebuild just to find out what's failing, that's a long time to wait. So it's really good to have the Jenkins server run these DB migration scripts. And this one wasn't actually a really hard script to set up once I was familiar with how we did these migration scripts across all of our different servers. It's just piling them up into a single Jenkins job as well, because they were individual Jenkins jobs before. So it was getting into the config, figuring out what they're doing, and then combining it into one as well. Sometimes it's not necessarily the best approach to add more testing to a single job, but it was useful in this context. So it's about trying to build feedback in at the right time where people will pay attention to those results. And so at the moment, I just have this job run as a nightly job, and it'll post to Teams if there are any failures. One of the good things about the DB migration scripts, because they often have the JIRA number or the patch number as part of the name for the migration script, it's really easy to pinpoint when someone's added a migration script to a JIRA as well, because it's there in the error message when the DB migration fails. Really useful. We also have a deployable test environment. I wasn't involved with helping build this, but the DevOps engineer who helped do this was just awesome. So this is using our Jenkins instance in AWS, so it's not using our dedicated server, but we can deploy a dedicated test environment to any patch in the queue. By default, it'll do the release patch, but if you want to go to the snapshot marker or deploy any changes you want to see and test it in a more, rather than testing it locally, testing it in a more dedicated environment, we now have this option. This was only built 2 weeks ago, and just having these options of being able to update a test environment with whatever code changes we have almost automatically is just amazing to be able to work with people who are like, yeah, we can help you build that. I do have some ideas on how we can improve this process. I don't know if I want to set up maybe a nightly release on our snapshot marker, or if it's useful going back to our release marker when we're about to do a release, so that one of the testing practices that a lot of the people on my team will check, like, just want to ask, is this a new bug or is it existing? So they'll go to the previous release patch, see if the bug is there, or go to their local changes. So just being able to facilitate going back to a release target and going, does this bug exist there versus is this a new bug? I think I will use this test environment to help manage that. But also we needed a deployable test environment with its own IP infrastructure, so that we could use tools like LambdaTest and Datadog to monitor some of our test environment stuff, because your local environment is just off a local IP address. Nothing from the outside of the internet can touch your local because you don't have the network set up. So this was great to have a test environment that could be exposed to the wider internet and traffic too. Also worked on a data injector script as well. It's just really a wrapper on top of the Maven framework, but it was nice to get involved and build up experience using Maven as well. I still have so many enhancements to do to do this framework, but it's basically piggybacking off what the developers had built for the integration test. But instead of using the integration test and making assertions, it's just going through the process of creating policies, doing a whole bunch of different things, just so we can inject data into our test environments to make it easier for some of our people to do a whole bunch of testing. Also, as a tester, I tend to get involved with bug backlog management. This is like a task. I don't love doing this. Oh, it's so tedious. But I'm trying to, get all of the old bugs. If you've worked, like, this system has existed for 10 years, so there's lots of old bugs in the system that are no longer, I don't know if they're being used anymore or if they've accidentally been fixed or just haven't been managed. But yes, bug backlog management. Yay. But it's another easy one for testers to get involved with a new team. We have issues with UI testing. It seems like LambdaTest would be a great tool, but we can't use that with our current framework just yet. But Datadog synthetic tests are pretty cool, and they just allow you to monitor different test environments as well. So I went to a Datadog summit last week because we're paying for Datadog, and my manager was like, "Oh, we should probably get more value out of this system." So there's still plenty more work. I've only been here for 3 months. This is just to give you an idea of some of the enhancements that I've helped. And we haven't even touched performance testing, which is a little bit of an issue, but we'll get there eventually. So the topic of this conference was the future of testing. What is the future of testing? People are talking about shift left, getting earlier involved in the process. But I think getting involved with the DevOpsy stuff is more of a shift right, getting more involved with the delivery side of the process. But I think it's neither. The future of testing is just getting more involved. If you can pick up more skills and get more involved and add more value, whether it's on the business side or the engineering side, you have the tools and the capabilities to help your teams, whether it's improve your pipelines or just learn the technology that your team is using. I get a lot of testers ask me what's the best framework to learn automation with, and it's really depends. Like, what tools and technology are your developers using? Because if you can collaborate together, you'll get a lot more buy-in. I've worked on a couple of projects where the testers created their own framework in their own language, all the way over here, but we're working with a team of C# developers, and our automation's written in Java. So it means our C# developers don't want to touch the Java code with a 10-foot pole. So how are you going to encourage collaboration when you introduce different barriers such as different languages and frameworks? So just start off with the tools and technology that your team are currently using. Even if you've never touched them before, having a learning mindset would be a great benefit to keeping your career and the future of testing live and healthy. So you can access these slides at this link. I also have an announcement to make. I will be restarting the pair testing up on YouTube. So if you have any colleagues or people that you'd be interested in seeing for live pair testing on YouTube, please reach out to me and nominate their name. I want to get back into it and restart some pairing and interviewing other testers in our community. Thank you. Any questions?
Wow, what a fantastic session, Sam. We definitely have some questions here. Let me show that to you. Yeah, there you go. There's the first one from Travis Smith.
One testing team for all digital assets doesn't make sense to dividing teams into different structures is a huge organizational problem, and unfortunately I can't help answer that question because I prefer to work in smaller teams where they don't have that, and I don't think I'm paid enough to make those types of choices.
Great. So I hope Tori got his answer. Let me take you to the next question. There you go. Yeah, probably
So trends in mobile. I just the web testing I think has been more advanced than mobile testing. So basically, the trends I've been seeing is that mobile testing has kind of just gotten up to speed with what web testing was like 2 to 3 years ago. So to be able to do screenshot testing really easily or things along those lines. So it's really the tools evolving. There's like a gazillion different frameworks, and they all have different issues when it comes from quality. I'm biased towards working on native applications because you get a lot of quality out of the box for free, like accessibility, when you're using native frameworks, because Apple and Google care more generally about building accessible technology than generally your company does. So that's just one of the issues with using a platform like React Native or some of those other cross-platform frameworks is it's a little bit harder to do things like UI automation, because they're more cross-platform. It's like they've got the same problems that GWT has for UI automation, changing the element IDs all the time.
Awesome. Great. And we have the next question from Muthukumar.
So mobile app. One of my thoughts. I feel like the tools and technology have improved a lot for being able to do a lot of emulation-based testing. In the earlier days of mobile testing, you couldn't just rely solely on the emulators. You had to do real device testing because you'd always find bugs. And there's like in the early days of Android development, Samsung still write their own custom Android OS, but it's now I see less Samsung-specific issues because it closely matches the Google version of Android a bit more. So what are my thoughts? I think the emulation technology and the simulation technology for mobile testing has been exceptional. It's gone so much better over the last couple of years, and the last couple of mobile apps that I've worked on, we didn't pick up any device-specific bugs anymore. So you could get away with doing more emulation and only simulation-based testing.
Lovely. Awesome. All right. Then we have from Kashif Bhanti.
Shift left. I want to write a book on it. No one's written a book yet on shift left. I've just not had the time to so far. I think it's a misnomer because delivering software is not a linear process, and it's an interesting model, but all models are wrong. And
Great.
thoughts on automation, end-to-end tests in that regard. We should try to reduce them as much as possible because they're hard to debug, they take a long time to run, and we should be focusing on trying to build out testing and quality earlier on in the dev process because it just helps facilitate that feedback.
Right. Just got one more coming from Ivan.
So I mentioned I'm the first tester with 14 devs. Well, at the moment, the ratio is 1 to 14. I'm not likely to get involved with hiring anytime soon. There might be, coming onto this role, I was really drawn for being able to influence the culture of quality and testing, and being able to come in and help drive that. And I might get involved with hiring later on if we are growing the team. At the moment, we have 14 devs and it's a single team. We really should be trying to split that up into 2 teams. Something about that pizza-sized team or something like that. But we're still trying to figure stuff like that. Like we have a company stand-up at 9:13 every morning where everyone talks about everything that they're working on. This is not scalable for when we hire slightly more people. So we have to figure out how we're going to keep open communication across multiple parts of the company. So challenges with the starting off as the first tester. I think my main challenges are actually just been getting up to speed because it is a really complex product. The founders have been working on the product for 10 years. There's a lot of implicit knowledge in other people's heads and they're kind of busy, and I always feel like a pain in the ass to go, hey, can you help me figure out how to do some of this Maven stuff, which sounds like it should be pretty straightforward. So it's my biggest challenge has been finding time to try and get up to speed from other people in the team.
Awesome. And then we have from Manoj.
Robotic automation. I haven't touched any robotics for a little while. I actually just handed all of my robotics to a friend of mine who has 2 young kids, and I'm hoping that they get more use out of my Lego robotics than I did over the last couple of years. It's unfortunate, but I haven't had a lot of time to do anything like that.
Awesome. So hope Manoj got his answer. Uh, awesome. So I don't think so. We have any more questions from the team. Great. Yeah. Awesome. So yeah. So thank you so much, Sam, for this wonderful session. And I hope you all found this session insightful. We would be hosting a recorded session of this on YouTube, along with other sessions that going on in TestMu Conference. So do subscribe to LambdaTest YouTube channel so that you can go back and listen to them again and share with your peers. So happy
Awesome.
testing, yeah, and have a great day.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And I hope you feel inspired to get involved with pipelines. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you so much for joining it.